HDR. Now there are three main formats that movies are mastered in. There is HDR10, HDR10 Plus, and Dolby Vision. Now both HDR10 Plus and Dolby Vision have dynamic metadata so that the movies that are mastered in those formats can have scene-by-scene brightness. So each scene can have a brightness that is different from the scene before it or the one after it, while HDR10 doesn't have that dynamic metadata but instead has static. So the question is, with both of these HDR formats having dynamic metadata, which one of them is better? Well, today we're going to compare them and find out. Stick around. Perfect. Hey guys, it's the Villaman here, home theater enthusiast and all-around tech lover, and on this channel we review TVs, but not only that, we also do comparisons, because while I have the TVs here, I like to do comparisons that I think are interesting or ones that you guys ask for and want to see. Oh, and we also review audio gear too, so if you're into that and you haven't subscribed yet, then you'll be seeing more of me, so you might as well subscribe right now. Now, of course, this video, like all my videos, will be in 4K HDR, so you can watch it in 4K HDR on your newer iPhone or Android devices or your 4K HDR TVs, and I recommend that because then you can see all the detail of the video. But if you don't have an HDR device, then in SDR you'll still be able to see a lot of what's going on. Now, for this comparison, I'll be using one of the only TVs to support all HDR standards, and that's the Vizio P-Series Quantum X. It's Vizio's flagship LCD TV of 2019, and it supports HDR10, HDR10 Plus, Dolby Vision, and Hybrid Log Gamma HDR, so it has every box checked. Now, there aren't many movies which are mastered in both HDR10 Plus and Dolby Vision, but I just so happen to have two of them, so I'll be using those for the comparison. And I'll be using the Panasonic UB820 Blu-ray player connected directly to the TV. Alright, let's get into it. The first scene we'll be comparing is from Alita Battle Angel, and the scene's on the brighter side, so it's a good test of dynamic range. And what I want you to do is see if you can identify which is which. Take the poll in the top right hand corner of your screen. Now, each HDR type will have its own backlight color, so you can use that to identify which one you're looking at as you watch the video. Now, in this first freeze frame, we can see where there's a difference in the backlight of the TV, but we can see in Alita's shirt that it has more contrast and the colors are more vivid, and that's also true of the clothes of the people in the background. Since we're using the same source, things such as sharpness or motion handling won't be an issue in this comparison, since they'll remain the same between the two HDR standards. The HDR10 Plus version, however, is brighter. This scene is a good test of the dynamic range, with the dark clothing in the foreground and the bright cityscape in the background. Again, the HDR10 Plus version is brighter, while the Dolby Vision version is more contrasty and lacks as much detail in the shadows. And if we include the HDR10 version, we can see where the scene is even brighter than the HDR10 Plus version. The HDR10 version had some ghosting in the picture, but I added it anyways because I thought it was some great context. The peak highlights of the HDR10 Plus version seems brighter than the Dolby Vision and HDR10 version. Let's move on to the second movie in our comparison, Godzilla, the King of Monsters. I like to use this as a test scene because it has great dynamic range with the sun in the background and the dark ocean in the foreground. It's also a good test of posterization to see if there's any banding in the sky. The HDR10 Plus version is brighter overall and has more details in the dark portions of the screen. That's evident in the bottom right hand corner in the dark ocean. In the Dolby Vision version, you can't make out quite as much detail in the installation as you can in the HDR10 Plus version. You can also still make out the highlight details in the brighter portion of the screen with the clouds, so I'd say the HDR10 Plus version has better dynamic range in this scene than the Dolby Vision version. There's no posterization evident in either format. In this scene, you can see where there's a lot of black details being crushed in the Dolby Vision version. Dolby Vision has more perceived saturation, but I think that's actually due to its higher contrast. In this clip, we see more of the same, where HDR10 has an overall brighter picture while Dolby Vision has a darker picture with bright highlights, while HDR10 Plus has more of a balance with both highlight detail and shadow detail. So tell me, did the comparison live up to your expectations that you had going into the comparison? Let me know in the comments. As far as my thoughts on the comparison, the HDR10 picture was consistently brighter, and that's because it doesn't have the scene-by-scene dynamic brightness control that HDR10 Plus and Dolby Vision has. HDR10 Plus and Dolby Vision were pretty similar except for the differences in contrast and perceived saturation. HDR10 Plus was brighter when compared to Dolby Vision, but it didn't have the same contrast and the same perceived saturation as the Dolby Vision picture had. That might of course be due to the mastering of the movie and not necessarily the format itself, but that's all we have to work with, so that's what we saw. So for those of you wondering if you're missing out on something by having a display that doesn't support one or the other, then as we saw in the comparison, in the real world, even though the specs are different on a spec sheet, in the real world, there's not that big a difference. No matter which of these formats you actually have, you will have a great viewing experience. Now, of course, the dynamic metadata HDR formats have more room to grow, and especially Dolby Vision, but there are no TVs there that exist right now that can make full use of the Dolby Vision spec, so 12-bit panel up to 10,000 nits of brightness. No TV can accomplish that right now. But you can't discount that it does have the potential to grow with the industry over time. But who knows what the future holds, right? Oh, you're looking at that speaker? Well, I just got those beasts in and the video will be up soon, so if you haven't subscribed yet, then you know what to do. There was some shifting in the contrast on the screen, which I think was due to the backlight, so this test might have been better on an OLED TV, and Vizio will be releasing an OLED TV later on in 2020, so if you guys are actually interested in that, I could redo the test using an OLED TV, so let me know in the comments. I like doing comparisons like this because before I even started making YouTube videos, I always wondered certain things, and now I actually have the opportunity to answer those questions for people like me who are also wondering that. I hope this comparison has at least satisfied your curiosity or even answered a few questions that you may have had. Let me know your thoughts in the comments about what HDR format your display supports. Don't forget to like the video if you liked it and subscribe if you haven't. And if you like this t-shirt, then you can get it in the merch store where we have this design and many others. Thanks for watching, and until next time, this has been your friendly neighborhood Villaman saying, peace.